I want to tell you about the retirement party. It lasted 45 minutes. There was a sheet cake from the grocery store with my name on it spelled correctly, which I appreciated because they'd spelled it wrong on my name badge for the first 3 years, and I'd stopped correcting them. There were about 15 people in the break room, mostly drivers I'd worked with, and a couple of mechanics and the dispatch supervisor who'd hired me 29 years earlier and who shook my hand and said something about service and dedication that I could tell he'd said before to other people retiring before me, because it had the rhythm of something rehearsed. They gave me a card signed by everyone and a gift card to a restaurant I'd never been to. And then the pension coordinator from the transit authority came in with a manila envelope and handed it to me and said, "Here's your packet, Dennis. Congratulations." The packet contained my pension documents, $1,014 a month before taxes. After taxes, approximately $1,000. 29 years of driving a city bus through every neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, through ice storms and heat waves and construction detours, and the 5 a.m. routes that start in the dark and the late night routes that end in it, and the number on the paper was $1,000 a month. The pension coordinator shook my hand too. He said good luck. He meant it genuinely, but the phrase, combined with the number, had a weight that I don't think he intended. Good luck, as in, you're going to need it. As in, this number and this city and the math between them is a problem that we are now finished helping you solve. Good luck. My name is Dennis Frazier. People who know me call me Denny, 69 years old, 29 years behind the wheel of a Milwaukee County Transit System bus. Current resident of Hoi An, Vietnam, a small city on the Central Coast that has been recognized by UNESCO and that has lanterns strung across its streets at night, and a river that runs through the old town, and a pace of life that I did not know existed and that I did not know I needed until I found it. My rent is $280 a month for a one-bedroom house with a courtyard. I eat 3 meals a day, every day, food that is fresh and varied and prepared by people who consider cooking an act of care rather than an act of commerce. I see a doctor when I need to. I sleep through the night. I have $412 left at the end of every month, and the $1,000 that the transit authority gave me with a handshake and a good luck has become, in this specific place on this specific side of the world, a life that I genuinely did not know was available to someone like me. Not a vacation, not a temporary escape, a life. The kind you build, the kind that has a morning routine and a neighborhood and people who know your name. Let me tell you about the bus, because the bus is where I spent more hours of my adult life than anywhere else, including my own home. I started driving for Milwaukee County Transit at 28. I'd been doing a series of jobs that all had one thing in common, which is that they ended warehouse, loading dock, a brief stretch in a meatpacking plant in Cudahy that I don't talk about because there's nothing to say about it that you'd want to hear. My father drove a delivery truck for a bread company for 32 years, and he told me once the only piece of career advice he ever gave me: find the job with the pension and stay. He said it like it was a formula. Find, stay, pension. I found the transit authority. I stayed. The pension was the point. The bus was the instrument. I was good at it. Not good in the way that gets you promoted, because bus drivers don't get promoted. They get routes. Good in the way that gets you the trust of the dispatch office and the respect of the regular passengers, and the knowledge that when Route 30 goes through the Menomonee Valley in January with black ice and a 40-foot bus and 47 passengers who need to get to work, the person behind the wheel is going to get them there without incident. That's the skill. Not speed, not flare, calm under conditions that are not calm. I drove every route in the system over 29 years. The early morning routes when the city is still dark and the only passengers are the people who clean the offices before the office workers arrive. The school routes with the teenagers who are loud in a way that requires patience rather than authority, because authority doesn't work on teenagers, but patience sometimes does. The late night routes with the people who are coming from shifts that end at midnight and who sit in the back with the exhaustion of someone who has been working since the rest of the city was eating dinner. I knew the city from the seat of a bus the way a river pilot knows a river. Every pothole, every stoplight that runs long, every corner where pedestrians don't look. 29 years of that knowledge accumulated in my body and my reflexes and the particular way I held the wheel, which my daughter Caitlin once told me I did even when I was driving my personal truck, which is probably true because 29 years of anything gets into your hands. The marriage lasted 12 years. My wife Patricia and I got married when I was 31. She was a dental hygienist from Wauwatosa. We had Caitlin, and then 2 years later we had Ryan. The marriage ended the way a lot of marriages of bus drivers end, which is that the schedule makes you absent in the specific hours when a marriage needs you present. The early mornings, the late nights, the weekends that aren't weekends because buses run on weekends and someone has to drive them, and seniority determines who doesn't have to, and I didn't have enough seniority for enough years. Patricia was patient for a long time and then she wasn't, which I don't blame her for because patience with absence has a shelf life, and ours expired. We divorced when I was 43. She got the house, which was fair because the house was mostly hers, in the sense that she was the one who was in it. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Milwaukee, which became my address for the next 26 years. The apartment was $730 a month when I moved in. By the time I retired, it was $950. $950 out of a $1,000 pension, $50 of margin, $50 a month for food, for everything, for the total remainder of being alive after the rent was paid. I know what you're thinking because it's what I thought. Move to a cheaper apartment. I looked. In Milwaukee, in the neighborhoods where I was willing to live, meaning neighborhoods where I could walk to a grocery store and where the building had functioning heat, which in Milwaukee is not a preference but a survival requirement from November through March, the cheapest one-bedroom I found was $820. The savings would have been $130 a month, which would have brought my total margin to $180, which is better than $50, but which is still a number that flinches every time the car needs a repair or the pharmacy has a copay that's higher than expected, or winter arrives and the heating supplement doesn't cover what the cold actually costs. I want to describe the last winter in Milwaukee because the last winter is the one that made the decision for me. Milwaukee winter is not a metaphor. It is a physical fact that begins in November and does not end until April, and that requires a specific and expensive infrastructure to survive. Heat, insulation that the apartment may or may not have, depending on the building's age and the landlord's investment priorities. Winter clothing that costs money, a car that starts in negative 10 degrees, or a bus pass, and even the bus pass is not free. My heating bill in January of my last winter was $142. My pension was $1,000. My rent was $950. My heating bill was $142. 1,000 minus 950 minus 142 is negative 92. I was in deficit. In January, I was $92 short of breaking even before food, before anything. I ate from a food pantry that month. I am not ashamed of this. I am reporting it. A food pantry at a church on Oklahoma Avenue, where the volunteers knew my name because I'd been coming since November. At 66 years old, after 29 years of driving a bus for the city of Milwaukee, I was eating from a food pantry in the winter because the pension did not cover the rent and the heat in the same month. This is the fact. And facts, when they're bad enough, become decisions. Ryan found the videos. Ryan is my son, 34, works as a plumber in Milwaukee, practical in the way that people who work with their hands are practical, meaning he trusts things he can verify and distrusts things he can't. He came over on a Sunday in February, which is what Ryan does. He comes over on Sundays with a six-pack, and we watch whatever game is on, and we don't talk about the things that are difficult because we're both men who handle difficult things by not discussing them until discussing them becomes unavoidable. This Sunday he came with the six-pack and also with his phone open to a video. He said, "Dad, watch this." The video was a man in his 60s, American, living in Vietnam, showing his apartment, his meals, his monthly expenses. The numbers were on the screen. I watched the whole thing. Then Ryan showed me 3 more. Then he showed me a spreadsheet he'd made. Ryan had made a spreadsheet. My son, the plumber, had gone home after a previous Sunday, researched the cost of living in Vietnam, and built a spreadsheet comparing my expenses in Milwaukee to projected expenses in 3 Vietnamese cities. He handed me the phone with the spreadsheet on it and said, "Dad, the numbers work." I checked them twice. He said it the way he'd say a pipe connection was solid, verified, pressure tested. The numbers work. I looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. Hoi An was one of the 3 cities. The rent column said $250 to $300. The food column said $150 to $200. The healthcare column said numbers that I read 3 times because I thought the decimal was in the wrong place. I looked up from the phone at the apartment, at the window that had frost on the inside because the insulation was insufficient, and the heating bill was already more than I could pay. And I said to Ryan, "How do you know this is real?" And he said, "You don't. You go find out," which is exactly what a plumber would say. You don't know until you check the line. So you check the line. The book, You Were Never Meant to Stay. I found during the 3 weeks of research that followed Ryan's spreadsheet, I was reading everything. Forums, blog posts, government visa pages, YouTube comments from people who lived in the places I was considering, and in a forum thread about the emotional weight of leaving America, someone recommended this book. I am not a reader. I have read maybe 15 books in my adult life outside of what driving school required. This one I read in a week because it was speaking directly to the thing that was sitting on my chest, which was not the logistics. The logistics Ryan had covered with the spreadsheet. The thing on my chest was the feeling that leaving Milwaukee was a failure. That a man from Milwaukee, whose father drove a bread truck for 32 years and never left, who himself drove a bus for 29 years and never left, was supposed to stay. Staying was the deal. You find the job, you stay, you get the pension, you live on the pension where you earned it. That's the formula my father gave me, and the formula I followed, and the formula that produced $1,000 a month and a food pantry on Oklahoma Avenue. The book asked a question that I couldn't answer without admitting something I'd been avoiding. It asked, is the formula working? Not did you follow it correctly, is it working? And the honest answer, the answer I gave sitting in the apartment with the frost on the window and the food pantry receipt still in my coat pocket, was no. The formula was not working. The formula had produced exactly what it promised, a pension, and the pension was not enough. Not because I'd done something wrong, because the formula was built for a version of Milwaukee that charged $400 rent and $60 for heat, and that version doesn't exist anymore. I'd followed the rules of a game that had changed the rules while I was playing it. The book helped me see that leaving wasn't breaking the formula. The formula was already broken. Leaving was the rational response to a broken formula. The link is in the description. Caitlin cried. I need to tell you that, because the honest version includes the parts that hurt. Caitlin lives in Minneapolis, works as a medical billing coordinator, has a 6-year-old named Oliver, who calls me Pop Pop and who I love with everything I have. When I told Caitlin on the phone, she cried, not because she thought I was making a mistake, because she understood why I needed to go. She understood the food pantry and the heating bill and the $50 of margin and what those things do to a person over time. She cried because her father, who drove a bus for 29 years without an accident, who raised her on bus driver wages, who taught her to ride a bike in the parking lot of the transit depot on Sundays when nobody was there, was eating from a food pantry. That's why she cried. And then she stopped and said, Dad, you deserve to eat dinner without doing math first. You deserve to eat dinner without doing math first. I wrote that down. It's in the notebook that I took to Vietnam. I look at it when I need to remember why I'm here. I flew out of Milwaukee in March, Milwaukee to Chicago, Chicago to Seoul, Seoul to Da Nang, and then a 40-minute taxi from Da Nang to Hoi An. The total travel time was about 22 hours. I slept for almost none of it because I was doing what I always do, which is watching the road, except the road was 35,000 feet below me, and I was watching it from a window instead of from behind a wheel. When the taxi from Da Nang turned onto the road to Hoi An, the landscape changed. Rice paddies on both sides, flat and green, with water reflecting the sky. Water buffalo standing in the fields. Women in conical hats working in the rows, and then the outskirts of Hoi An appeared. Low buildings, lanterns beginning, trees with roots that had been growing for hundreds of years over the walls of old houses. The taxi driver said, Hoi An, and pointed, and I looked, and I thought, this is as far from Milwaukee in winter as a person can get. Not just in miles, in everything. Hoi An is a small city. 30,000 people in the old town area, more in the surrounding districts. It was a trading port centuries ago, Japanese and Chinese and European merchants, and the architecture from that era is still standing, preserved, lived in. The old town has narrow streets, yellow buildings with wooden shutters, lanterns that are lit every evening, and that turn the river into something that looks like it was designed for the specific purpose of making a person stop and pay attention. It is beautiful in a way that I was not prepared for, because beauty was not what I was looking for. I was looking for numbers. I found numbers and beauty, which is a combination that I had not considered possible on a $1,000 pension. Outside the old town is the rest of Hoi An, residential neighborhoods with local markets and repair shops and schools, and the daily activity of a Vietnamese city that is not a museum but a functioning place where people have lives. That's where I live, in the functioning part. The old town is where I walk in the evening because the lanterns are free and the river doesn't charge admission, and a coffee on the waterfront costs 60 cents. The numbers: $1,000 a month, which after the tax adjustment on the pension comes to approximately $980. That is my total income. No Social Security yet. That starts at 70, which is next year, and when it starts, the math gets even better. But I'm giving you the current numbers because the current numbers are already proof. Housing. I rent a house. A house, not an apartment, not a room. A one-bedroom house with a small courtyard that has a frangipani tree that blooms white flowers that smell like something I don't have a word for except that I stand under it some mornings just breathing. The house has a kitchen, a bathroom with hot water, a bedroom that fits my bed and a wardrobe, and a front room where I have a table and 2 chairs and the window that faces the courtyard. Rent, $280 a month. No. In Milwaukee, my apartment alone was $950. $280 here gets me a house with a courtyard and a tree. Electricity, $14 a month. I use the fan most of the time because the climate in Hoi An is warm, but not the oppressive heat of southern Vietnam. Air conditioning exists in the bedroom and I use it some nights. $14. Water, $3. Internet, $10 for fiber that streams video calls to Caitlin and Ryan without buffering. Phone, $6. Total housing, $313. Healthcare, I have an insurance policy for foreign residents that costs $65 a month. Covers hospitalization and serious events. Routine care at the local clinic costs $6 per visit. My blood pressure medication, which I started at 62, $7 a month. Same medication I was paying $58 for in Milwaukee after my Part D copay. My knee, which 29 years of bus pedals treated roughly, gets physical therapy twice a week at $4 per session. $32 a month for physical therapy that I could not afford in Milwaukee at any frequency. Total monthly health care, approximately $115. Food, a bowl of Sao Lo, which is the noodle dish that is specific to Hoi An, and that is made with water from a specific well and noodles from a specific process, and that I eat 3 or 4 mornings a week, costs $1.25. A full lunch at a local restaurant, rice with grilled pork or chicken and vegetables and soup on the side, $2 to $3. Dinner from the market, which I cook myself 3 nights a week because I've learned to cook Vietnamese food from Mrs. Thong next door, who decided that teaching me was her project and who shows up at my courtyard gate with ingredients and instructions delivered in a combination of Vietnamese gestures and the occasional exasperated correction when I cut the herbs wrong. Approximately $2 per home-cooked meal. The nights I eat out, seafood or hot pot, or the ban ai xio that the woman on Tran Phu Street makes with the practiced confidence of someone who has made 10,000 of them for $4 to $6. Monthly food total, approximately $170. I eat well. I eat 3 meals a day. I eat fresh food, local food, food that is made by people who know what they're doing and who have been doing it for longer than I've been alive. Transportation. I bought a bicycle for $40 when I arrived, and it remains my primary transportation. Hoi An is flat and compact, and a bicycle is the correct vehicle. Monthly maintenance on the bicycle approximately zero. For longer trips to Da Nang, which is 30 kilometers away, and where the larger hospital and the international airport are, I take a bus that costs $1.50 each way. Monthly transportation, approximately $10. Everything else, the haircut for $1.50, the laundry for $2 a load, the evening coffee by the river, the occasional tailor-made shirt, because Hoi An is famous for its tailors, and a custom shirt costs $8. And I have allowed myself this one luxury, because after 29 years of a transit authority uniform, I find genuine pleasure in wearing something that was made specifically for me, approximately $90 a month. Grand total monthly expenses, approximately $698, monthly income, $980, monthly surplus, $282. $282 saved every month. In Milwaukee, my surplus was negative, 92 in January. Here, every month is positive. Every single month. The trajectory reversed so completely that I sometimes sit in the courtyard under the frangipani tree and do the math one more time, just to confirm that the numbers haven't changed. They haven't. The numbers are patient and consistent and real. Mrs. Thand is 74 and lives in the house that shares a wall with mine, and she appeared at my courtyard gate on the third day with a plate of spring rolls and a determination to feed me that has not diminished in 3 years. She does not speak English. I speak approximately 80 words of Vietnamese, most of which are food-related because my vocabulary has been shaped by the priorities of my daily life. We communicate through the food. She shows me how to roll the rice paper. She corrects my knife technique with the directness of someone who has been cooking for 60 years and who does not have time for my American approximations. She brings herbs from her garden that I cannot name in either language, but that I have learned to use by following her hands. In exchange, I fixed her gate hinge and the leak in her bathroom faucet, which took 20 minutes, and my father's wrench set that I brought from Milwaukee, and which established me in her estimation as a useful neighbor, which in Vietnamese culture is a meaningful category. She calls me An Den, which is approximately what my name sounds like in Vietnamese, and she has introduced me to every person on our street as such. I am An Den, the American who can fix things and who is learning to cut herbs correctly, the difficult parts, because I owe you the complete version. The rainy season in central Vietnam runs from October through January, and it rains in a way that Milwaukee rain does not prepare you for. It rains with commitment. The streets flood. The river rises. The old town gets water in its lower floors. My house has never flooded, but the street outside has, and navigating a flooded street on a bicycle is a skill I acquired through necessity rather than instruction. The heat from May through September is real, not as extreme as southern Vietnam, but persistent and humid. I manage it with the fan and the air conditioning and an adjustment in expectations about what being comfortable means. The language is my ongoing work. 3 years of immersion have given me enough Vietnamese to handle daily life, the market, the clinic, basic conversation with neighbors. For anything complex, I use the translation app and the patience of the people around me, which has been uniformly generous. The distance from Caitlin and Oliver is the hardest thing. Video calls help. Oliver shows me his drawings and tells me about school in the way that 6-year-olds tell you about things, which is with total commitment and partial coherence, and I love every second of it. But a screen is not a room. I miss being in the room. Caitlin is coming in April. She's bringing Oliver. I have a bedroom ready for them and a plan to take Oliver to the Lantern Festival and to the beach at Ann Bang and to Mrs. Don's kitchen, where she will teach him to roll spring rolls, and he will be better at it than I am, because children don't overthink the rice paper the way adults do. I want to talk to the person who got the envelope, the manila envelope with the pension number in it, or the Social Security statement, or whatever document it was that had a number on it that you looked at and thought, this is what I'm worth, this is what the years produced. Not because you're ungrateful, because the number and the cost of living in the place where you earn the number don't match, and the gap between them is the space where your life is supposed to happen, and it's not big enough. I know that gap. I lived in that gap for 3 years in Milwaukee. $50 of margin, food pantry on Oklahoma Avenue, heat at a temperature that was financial rather than comfortable. The gap is where dignity goes to be tested, and the test is not fair because the gap isn't your fault. You followed the formula: find the job, stay, get the pension. The formula worked. The pension is real. The pension is also not enough. Not because you failed, because the formula assumed a world where rent was a third of your income and heat was affordable and food didn't require a pantry. That world changed. The formula didn't update. You did everything right, and the math is still wrong. And the book, You Were Never Meant to Stay, says something about this that I needed to hear, and that you might need to hear too. It says that loyalty to a place that can't sustain you is not loyalty. It's endurance. And endurance has value, but it has limits. And when the limit arrives, the loyal thing, the truly loyal thing, is to take care of yourself with the resources you have in the place where those resources work. The link is in the description. Ryan came in October. 4 days. He walked through the house, checked the plumbing out of professional reflex, pronounced it solid, and then stood in the courtyard looking at the frangipani tree. He was quiet for a while. Ryan is quiet the way I'm quiet, which is not absence of thought, but organization of it. Then he said, "Dad, this is good." 2 words. This is good. From a man who checks things twice and verifies before he speaks. This is good. We went to the waterfront that evening and sat with coffee and watched the lanterns reflect on the river, and he said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" I said, "What?" He said, "The spreadsheet. I keep thinking that I made a spreadsheet and it turned out to be right." He was proud of the spreadsheet. I was proud of him for making it. We sat there with the lanterns and the river and the coffee, and we didn't say anything else about it because we'd both said enough. I'm in the courtyard. It's morning. The frangipani is blooming. The coffee is from the shop on the corner. 60 cents, strong and sweet. Mrs. Than's kitchen is producing sounds that mean lunch will arrive at my gate in approximately 2 hours, whether I asked for it or not. The wrench set is in the bedroom closet next to the notebook where Caitlin's sentence lives. You deserve to eat dinner without doing math first. I ate dinner last night. Grilled fish from the night market. $3. Fresh from the boats. I did not do math first. I did not need to. The $1,000 that the Transit Authority gave me with a handshake and a good luck turns out to be enough. Not in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, it was a sentence. Here, it's a life. The pension coordinator said, "Good luck." I found something better than luck. I found arithmetic that works. Come see the lanterns. Mrs. Than has spring rolls.